Welcome to Chapter 12, everyone. So now we're getting into the last organ system of the semester, the nervous system. Nervous system is a really complex organ system, though it contains only two major structures, the brain and spinal cord. It has a lot of functions, and it has a lot of structures outside of that brain and spinal cord, all of those nerves and ganglia. So what is the function of nervous tissue? The nervous tissue or nervous system perceives information and responds to that information. That's its job. And so it controls all or the majority of our muscles and has some control over our heart also. So it doesn't directly control our heart, but it alters our heart activity. It controls glandular activity, and so basically the majority of the things you do occur because the nervous system is sending signals for us to do it. Breathing would be an example of something the nervous system is constantly telling us to do. So how does it work? There are receptors all over our body, internally and externally. These receptors then take in information from either the external or internal environment, and the information that they take in is called a stimulus. The stimulus then is sent from the receptors to the afferent neurons, to a region called the integration center, or our CNS, where we process the information and determine if we need to respond, and then we send out that response through effectors, or through efferent neurons to effectors. And effectors can be glandular tissue, muscle tissue, different things like that. And that brings about some type of a change. So there are two major classifications of the nervous system. We have the central nervous system, and then we have the peripheral nervous system. Central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord. So this here is your central nervous system. They're colored the same, so it kind of makes it hard to see. But the brain and spinal cord are your central nervous system. The nerves outside of the brain and spinal cord, all the ganglia outside the brain and spinal cord, those are your peripheral nervous system. Nervous system is composed of nervous tissue, and the two main cells of nervous tissue are your neurons. So this is a neuron, and this happens to be what we call a multipolar neuron because we have multiple poles off that cell body, and tiny little neuroglial cells. And so these are different types of neuroglial cells that surround those neurons and protect the neurons. The nervous system has two types, what we call matter. So we have white matter, and then we have gray matter. And typically you see the white matter is on the inside of the brain, the gray matter is on the outside of the cortex. The white matter is composed of the axons, and it's white because of the fatty myelin sheath that surrounds those axons. The gray matter is the dendrites and the cell bodies, and because they don't have that myelin, they look more gray in structure. In the nervous system, specifically in our CNS, in the brain, we have regions of cell bodies that cluster together, and they form what we call a nucleus. So there's a lot of different meanings for the term nucleus. You've heard the term nucleus when we were talking about cells. A cell has a nucleus, and in the nucleus we code the DNA. When you're talking about chemistry, atoms have a region called the nucleus, the inner region where all the protons and neutrons are found. But in our brain, the nucleus is where we house clusters of cell bodies that have specific functions. In the PNS, those same clusters of cell bodies would be called ganglion. And this is just what I was just talking about. What is a nucleus? So, in the nervous system, we also have lots of nerves, but in the CNS, those nerves are typically called tracts. So we have an optic nerve that runs in from the eye, and then as it moves into the optic chiasma right here, it becomes an optic tract. It's the same exact nerve, but it's no longer called a nerve. It's now called a tract. And so here you have the left optic nerve, and the left optic nerve transmits information. At the chiasma, we have some mixing of the information from the left and right eye, and then the optic tracts, left and right, move to the opposite sides of the brain. So functionally, we can also classify the organ system as either sensory or motor. And then we can even further divide it from sensory. We can say, is it somatic sensory or is it visceral sensory? If it's motor, is it somatic motor or autonomic or visceral? Autonomic and visceral are interchangeable. So here we have the brain and again the spinal cord. This is your central nervous system. And then outside of that we have the peripheral nervous system. But we also have another region called the enteric nervous system that we don't tend to talk a lot about until we get into the digestive system. The enteric nervous system is often thought of as your second brain, and it has a lot of functions, which you'll learn more about when we get into the digestive system. But its major job is to help with digestion of materials, digestion and absorption, and just movement of materials through the digestive tract.